Hello Bishes, welcome back to a long-awaited video. I'm sorry I wasn't able to post the past 2 weeks or so because I was actually out on vacation taking a break from life. So yeah, it was very restful and I'm happy to be back making more videos. And for today's video, I wanted to talk about how you can get that promotion whenever you start at whatever job it is in animation mainly. Maybe you can apply this to some art related careers, but for the most part I'm speaking upon my knowledge thus far just from being in the animation industry. And in life you're gonna have to continue to make ends meet, and unfortunately as you get older your expenses are probably gonna rise, and with that hopefully you should be getting paid appropriately as time goes on. In addition to that, as you gain more experience in your career, naturally you should be recognized for that and be working in positions that are suitable for your skill level, under the assumption that you do want to grow in the industry, because some people don't care and that's totally fine. It really just depends on what is your preference. And for today's video, I'm just talking to those who I guess are interested in getting promoted or climbing up the ladder or just growing in their careers, whatever it is. I'm just going to be speaking about my personal experiences and how that can maybe apply to you. So for any of you who are new here, my name is Michelle and I am a story artist in the animation industry. I've also had some directing experience as well, but at the end of the day, my whole niche and thing within animation is story. That is my specialty and that is my field within animation. So most of the things that I talk about will be from a story artist perspective, because what I go through might be different from what somebody in visual development or somebody in special effects might go through. So yeah, in addition to that, I also just leave up these speed paints as kind of just a visualizer. They're not relevant or related to the topic that I'm talking about. It's more of just there to watch as I'm doing this podcast type of style video for the time being. So yeah, you can check out the full comic once again on Instagram. This one is about how at this point in time I don't really try that hard for my partner anymore, but when it comes to my girlfriends and friends, I'm gonna go all out, I'm gonna go all glam, and yeah, it's just a fun little comic and you can check it out on @MuteTripled on Instagram. So as some background information, when I first started off in the animation industry officially, like after I was done with my internships and whatnot, after I graduated, my first job that I officially landed was a storyboard revisionist at Glen Keane Productions / Netflix Animation. And that was my first job ever, like my first full-time job ever working in the animation industry. And it only took me around 1 to 2 months for me to actually get promoted into being a storyboard artist. And I know that could be fast to some people, that could actually be slow to some other people, I don't know. It's just what happened to me and how I feel like I got there, and then I will talk about how I eventually got into assistant directing and now just doing my own projects and whatnot. But first, let's start off with the promotion from becoming a storyboard revisionist to a storyboard artist. So when I was a storyboard revisionist, the things that I mostly focused on was to just do fixes for pre-existing boards. Storyboard artists already created the sequences and the storyboards, and it already went into an animatic, and I basically help make the changes that the directors feel like are needed after viewing everything through edit, which is where they watch the animatic. And from that, they will say like, hey, let's just have some changes here. They'll give me a list and walk through all the changes that are needed for this pre-existing storyboard / animatic, and I will go back into the boards and make those changes. The types of changes I was making was more like acting changes. You could change expressions on a character, you could change their poses, and there were moments where sometimes I had to do a little bit of mini reboarding, except I think some studios are trying to not do this because I think that for some some studios, they might take advantage of storyboard revisionists as like cheap work and make them just do storyboards, but for a cheaper price. So you might want to be careful if you are ever launched onto doing like a full reboarding thing, especially if you're at a unionized studio, because I believe you should be protected by that. So yeah, just make sure that you are doing what your story revisionist responsibilities are. Otherwise, if you are finding yourself doing full-on storyboard reboardings or like fully boarding new storyboards that are, you know, for an extended amount of time, then you should tell them like, hey, I should be a storyboard artist then. There were moments in being a revisionist that I had to reboard certain specific shots, but again, note that it's a shot, it's just one moment and it's not something that was an extended sequence where I had to reboard multiple shots. So things like that is when you get into the gray area, and you should just kind of know when you are doing a little bit more than what your responsibilities say they should be. So when I first started off as a revisionist though, I was extremely determined to be a storyboard artist because at that moment in time, that was like my biggest dream. So I was just really determined to show people I wanted to be a storyboard artist, and I wanted to prove to them that I'm capable of boarding out my own sequences, but it's just in the form of a comic. So that was just one thing that I did. But another thing I did was every time that they launched me on these fixes for storyboard revisions and whatnot, I would do my best. Like if they wanted me to just change this character's facial expression, I would try to make it like the most clear version of what it is that they wanted. Like, by what I mean by best, it does not mean like, oh, make it so pretty and beautiful that they can't like handle it. It means more of you're really hitting the note. You're making it very clear that you understand what the director is saying. So if the director is saying, hey, for this moment, we want it to feel a little bit more intense, maybe you're gonna have to change up the character expressions, the camera angle in a way that it's going to really say that this moment is intense. Like showing the director that you actually understand what they're saying sometimes is actually more important than how good the drawing looks itself. At this moment, foundational skills are pretty important, and if you can show the director that you understand perspective and you understand how to give characters a certain volume, because character sizes will matter when you storyboard, because the amount of space a character takes up on a screen will kind of matter, especially if you have a big character and small character. And this is coming from someone who pretty much for every show I have worked on, I have had a big character and a small character, and that shit kind of matters. So make sure that you have proportions and volume sizes correct. These are probably moments where I will say your foundational art skills will shine the brightest, but once you got the hang of that, that will matter a little bit less once you're a storyboard artist, because you've kind of already gotten the hang of it. So after doing these two things together, where I made it known that I'm really ambitious in doing my own thing outside of work, and whenever I do receive fixes, I really give it my all to make it as clear as day and align as closely to what it was the director was saying to me, I found that they were eventually starting to give me slightly bigger sequences where they were like, hey, why don't you just try to board out like these 2 pages? Like just try to board it out. And at first in my head, I was just like, well, I'm just a revisionist. Why am I doing this? But then afterwards, I realized that they were doing it to kind of just be like, okay, if she does this, then we're going to promote her to being a storyboard artist. And after I did those 2 pages, I was pulled into the office one day and just asked if I wanted to be a storyboard artist, and that was like one of the happiest days of my career life. So fast forward a few years, I've been storyboarding for a while, and then just last year I was starting my first role as an assistant director, and you might be wondering how I even got there from being a storyboard artist. Well, throughout the time between being a storyboard artist to my assistant director gig, I pretty much have been continuing my comic journey. I never let that stop. At the end of the day, even though it gets tiring sometimes to keep up with doing comics, I truly believe that making comics has benefited me in the long run. It's just great to, first of all, have something that you can claim as your own going on the side, but it also does, I feel like, help me continue to improve my skills in not just drawing and draftsmanship, but like storytelling and just seeing how people are reacting. And I feel like I get the chance to continuously try to experiment and play with the same idea in different variations. So doing comics on Instagram is kind of like a nice little sandbox for my long-term animation story related career. But I will say that the more driving factor as to how I landed that position was because the people who were working on this new project, which is now known as Oni, they are from the previous projects that I've worked on, and they really got to know me, and I feel like because of that connection, they were able to think of me when they were considering people for the roles at this project. So this is why I will say connections really matter, and of course you should still care about your work, but connections matter maybe just as much, because if the people don't know that you exist, then they probably won't reach out to ask you. But once people kind of have had the experience of working with you and see that you're a good person to be around, then they will definitely be thinking about you for future projects. And I think in the animation industry, you're more likely to form friendship-like relationships that can keep these relationships going instead of just purely business ones that are really stiff and stuff, you know? And when it comes to the storyboard craft itself, one thing that I feel like, again, helped me was whenever I storyboarded, yes, I made everything as clear as possible. Whenever I storyboard, I really just think back to when I was launched on that episode or that sequence, and I think about what it was the director was saying to me, like what words, what adjectives, what descriptions were they saying that they really wanted to illustrate this scene. Like, keep those keywords in mind, because when you're storyboarding, you want to make sure what it is that you're drawing out is going to match up or align with what it was that they said. Because obviously if they're like, hey, this is a fight between a mother and a daughter, you're not going to make this like something completely different from that. Like, you want to do whatever it is possible to make this moment feel like a mother-daughter fight or something like that. So I did that, but whenever I storyboarded, I also like to provide some extra shots, because I like to keep, you know, what edit might need in mind ahead of time. And it kind of helps that I kind of video edit on the side as a hobby as well, because I can kind of think about what editors might need. So whenever I storyboard, I can already sometimes foresee, like, hey, maybe they might need an extra pose of them just doing this, like, just in case. You don't know if they might need it or not, and if they don't need it, well, that's fine. They can just not use it, because half the shit that I make on this show probably will be deleted anyway, so what's one other additional drawing gonna do, you know? So I would sometimes provide just additional drawings or just do a little bit of an extra thing, just keeping in mind that, hey, I kind of know what's gonna be happening in the next step that will take place in editorial, and doing things like that to make some certain cuts in the animatic just transition a little bit smoother, so that people don't have to spend more time bugging storyboard artists to recreate this new like pose or something. And if you already provided it, that would just help the team a lot. So that was just one of the things I did as my little sprinkle or cherry on top as a storyboard artist that I feel like kind of helped contribute to me eventually getting into an assistant director position. And once I did get into that assistant director gig, I feel like looking back, here are some other tips that I would suggest for anyone who is looking to continue to grow in their field, is to always speak up if you do have an idea, but don't feel like you're forced to have to say things just to fill up the space. If you feel like you're just being a space filler, obviously you don't have to say what it is, but don't be afraid to interject. I know it's awkward sometimes to like have those moments where you're like, oh, and you guys cut each other off, but don't be afraid. Everyone kind of just acknowledges it, and nobody is going to remember this moment like 5 minutes after it happened. So don't be afraid to speak up about your ideas. Really showcasing to people that you have a voice and a say on this project will show that, hey, maybe you might have some leadership sensibilities, especially if you're able to spread your knowledge onto other storyboard artists as well. So in a way, you're kind of like a teacher and showing people that you're able to teach your knowledge to others and be able to clearly communicate the project assignment to the other storyboard artists, show that, hey, you are capable of a potential leadership position. Lastly, the thing that I feel like also helps is just asking. I know that sometimes it's awkward to ask people for more pay or asking for a promotion when nobody came to you first and you might have a chance of being rejected. I feel like it never hurts to at least just put it out there for people to let them know that this is what you want, so that when people are looking for different projects again, when a project ends, they will keep an eye out for you and they will remember your long-term goals. Just like how when I made my comics, I felt like I wanted to make people know that I want to eventually have my voice out there. That's why I feel like if your project just cannot offer you a promotion for whatever reason at that moment, do something outside of your job that shows people that, you know, hey, I'm capable of having that promotion and I'm giving myself that promotion. And of course, this is keeping in mind, this is for people who have the capacity to do so, because I know it's already a struggle juggling like one job in itself, so juggling two jobs is kind of a little bit overwhelming. So do it at a pace that you're comfortable with at first. This is not something that happens overnight. But if you want to get back more into the traditional way of negotiating, especially when you're done with a project, another way that you could potentially get promoted or at least get a raise is whenever your project ends, of course, you should maybe try seeking jobs that are within a position that is a level higher than the one that you previously worked in. Or when you are up in the interviews, then you can ask for a higher pay rate and you can mention inflation, your years of experience, and just also know how much some of your other coworkers are making. You can check out Salty Animators on Instagram. They post like a list of what different people within different animation industries are making. So if you don't know anyone within your immediate community, you can just look that up and try to see what other people are getting paid so that you know what you should be getting paid. It's becoming a more common practice for artists to ask each other how much they're getting paid on their projects so that you can see where you're standing amongst everything and evaluate whether or not if you're being paid fairly. And again, you can always check out stuff on the Animation Union, which I have mentioned a lot in previous videos, to see how much you should be getting paid after reaching a certain amount of experience years. But that's just, again, going back to the more traditional way of negotiating for your next future position, or even while you're still in the position itself. The only thing is I know that a lot of projects already have a set budget, so just keep that in mind and know that, hey, maybe if you cannot get the promotion on this project, maybe it'll be possible on the next one. So yeah, I hope that sharing this information helps some of you learn more about how you can continue to grow in your career, whether it be organically, naturally, or just through straight up asking and negotiating just like the good old days. So yeah, I feel like either of these work, maybe a mixture of both of them work too. So yeah, let me know how it goes. I hope that you all get the promotions that you deserve. So yeah, thanks for watching this video and I will see you all in the next one. So peace out and stay wholesome, bitches.